Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video we've got a couple of things to discuss, including a couple of signings, some more news updates surrounding a couple of teams like Ottawa, New Jersey, and Vancouver, plus a couple of off-season previews with the two teams who went to the Stanley Cup Final in Vegas and Florida. And we'll do all that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the NHL Hockey Channel. Now, as usual, I'll kick things off today with a couple of signings that have happened recently. Not too many, but there was a couple, and one significant one. So, we'll start with the one entry-level contract that was signed, and that was that the San Jose Sharks has signed forward Philip Bystedt to a 3-year entry-level contract that have an average annual value of $950,000, and a deal will begin at the start of next year. Now, for Bystedt, he was a very late-round pick in the first round of last year's draft, the 2022 draft. I think he was 27th overall. The Sharks traded down. They grabbed him when they had the chance at 27. A lot of people thought he would be more of a second-round player instead of a first-round player, so it was a bit surprising to see him go in the late first round, but he seems like he could eventually be maybe a good second, third-line center. He's been playing over in the SHL over the past couple of years. 2 years ago in his draft year, he had 1 goal and 2 points in 15 SHL games. But this year he had a whole bunch better, putting up 7 goals and 20 points in 45 SHL games. So a lot better, nearly put up a point every 2 games. So a lot more productive from Bystedt, and he looks like he could eventually still be a really good top 9 forward at the very least for the Sharks. Now, he's probably still a couple of years away from competing for a roster spot. I think he's probably going to need 1 more year back in the SHL, followed probably by 1 more year, maybe 2 in the minors. But I think in 2 to 3 years' time, Bystedt should definitely be challenging for like a roster spot on the Sharks. Sharks are also going through a bit of a rebuild, which should also allow some of their younger guys to get into the lineup. So if he was able to make it in the next 2 to 3 years, I would not be too surprised. So a good signing there for the Sharks, getting their first-round pick from last year, and a good prospect who could eventually be a good top 9 player in their system locked up over the next couple of years. And then we have a couple of depth signings. First was Columbus. They signed prospect Joshua Doon to a 1-year contract extension that will have an average annual value of $775,000, and the deal will begin at the start of this year. Now, for Doon, he's been mostly an NHL forward, but he did get his first taste of NHL action last year. 2 years ago, he had 6 goals and 11 points in 29 AHL games, which is a pretty solid point total for a good depth forward. But last year, he did a whole bunch better, putting up 2 goals and 37 points in 65 games. So a lot better from Doon last year. He looks like a really good player. He even got into 8 NHL games, putting up no points. But still, Doon looked like he was a really good player. I think eventually maybe he could be a good bottom 6 forward. Probably will start the minors next year. He was only called up last year because of the amount of injuries that the Jackets had suffered. So if the Jackets are going to be a lot more healthier next year, they probably won't have as much need for Doon, at least at the start of the season. If they go and get injuries, or if there's some players who aren't playing too well, maybe Doon gets a call-up. But I think for at least the start of the season, Doon will most likely play in the minors. So decent enough signing for the Jackets, but a good sign nonetheless to get a depth player in Doon. Then you have Clark Bishop. Bishop was a center left winger who signed last year a 1-year contract with the Calgary Flames as to be a depth forward. Never played in the NHL. 2 years ago, he did play a couple NHL games. After putting up 6 goals and 12 points in 35 games, did have an assist in 9 games at the NHL level with the Ottawa Senators. Then signed last offseason with the Flames. Went into this year as a depth forward, but the Flames never really were injured on the forward group. So he basically spent the entire season in the minors, putting up 11 goals and 23 points in 64 games. So solid point total, and obviously enough that the Flames still like him enough to sign him. So definitely did really good there. Bishop's a really good depth forward. He can probably be a bottom 6 forward if need be. Probably, once again, will probably start in the minors next year, but he could be one of the first call-up candidates for the Flames. So I wouldn't rule out him getting an opportunity early on in the season, but I just think that there's most likely that he is probably going to remain in the AHL for the first little bit. So definitely interesting to see. And then finally here with the Edmonton Oilers, the Alberta rivals of the Calgary Flames. They got one of their pending UFA forwards locked up for the next couple of years, as Derek Ryan, who's been with the Oilers the past couple of seasons, has signed a 2-year contract extension to remain with Edmonton in their bottom 6. They have an average annual value of $900,000, and a deal will begin at the start of next year. Now for Ryan, he's a center/right winger who's done really well in the Edmonton Oilers bottom six. He's been able to put up consistently at least 20 points over the past couple of years. He had 10 goals and 22 points in 75 games a couple of years ago. This past year, he put up 13 goals and then 20 points in 80 games. So he's been able to put up consistently 20 points, playing nearly the entire season. He's a really good bottom six forward for the Oilers, and I think he should definitely continue to excel in a bottom six role. Maybe he plays on the third line, maybe he plays on the fourth line. He's really versatile, so he can definitely do either or, but he's definitely a really solid bottom six forward. So I think it was the right move for the Oilers to bring him back, and I think he'll continue to do really well with the Edmonton Oilers. So definitely good signing for the Oilers to bring back one of their key depth pieces in Derek Ryan on a really cheap deal. Good signing for Joshua Doon, who signs his 2-year extension in Columbus, and Clark Bishop, who signs a 1-year extension in Calgary. I expect both to most likely be AHL forwards next year, but they could be call-up options in my opinion if there was some injuries on those two teams. And then the Sharks signed Philip Bystedt. And Bystedt was a first-round pick from last year's draft, who I think has the potential of being a solid top-9 forward. So, but that's all signs we're going to get to today. Once again, with no more playoffs, there's not really any playoff update, but I did forget to mention one thing in the Cup final recap that I had in the last video, and that is that the Conn Smythe winner went to Jonathan Marchessault. Marchessault was one of the original Golden Knights members, and definitely had a really fantastic playoffs. He was tied for the league lead in goals with 13, and he was second in the playoffs in points, only behind Jack Eichel. So definitely, Marchessault had one heck of a playoffs, and I think it was only fitting for one of the original Golden Knights to win the Conn Smythe, and Marchessault definitely played well enough to win it. So I like that move to give the Conn Smythe to one of the original Golden Knights. I think that was a really nice move. And I definitely think that Marchessault was deserving of the Conn Smythe. So definitely, MVP of the playoffs goes to Jonathan Marchessault. And then, yeah, just the Golden Knights are already won the Cup. So they wound up becoming the 21st team to win the Cup. That was correct. I did mention that in my last video. So they are the 21st team to win the Cup. And they're actually the third first team to win the Cup in the last 6 years. As we know, the last 3 years, Tampa won it twice in Colorado. But the 2 years before that, the Capitals won and the Blues won for the first time in their franchise history. So, and over the past 6 years, we've had 3 first-time Stanley Cup winners, which is actually quite surprising. And definitely really good to see some of these other hockey markets who haven't been really having much success in the playoffs get to the Cup final and win the Stanley Cup. So hopefully there could be some more teams like those, like the Caps, the Blues, the Golden Knights over the next couple of years who can win their first Stanley Cups. The list of teams who don't have Stanley Cups right now is the Columbus Blue Jackets from the Metro, the Florida Panthers, Ottawa Senators, and Buffalo Sabres from the Atlantic Division, the Arizona Coyotes, the Winnipeg Jets, the Nashville Predators and the Minnesota Wild from the Central Division, and the San Jose Sharks, Seattle Kraken, and Vancouver Canucks from the Pacific Division. So definitely, 7 West teams have not won a cup yet, 4 East teams have not won a cup yet, and I think there's still some teams out there who could challenge for a cup as early as next year. I think Buffalo and Ottawa, if they can improve enough, could definitely try and challenge for a cup. Florida just went to the Cup final last year, so I would not be surprised if they were to try and battle for a Cup next year. Minnesota is going to be another strong team next year in the Central Division. Would not be too surprising if they were challenging for the Cup. Nashville always seems to find a way to either be competitive or find a way into the playoffs, and then once they are in, as we saw with Florida, you never know what happens, so maybe Nashville is able to challenge for the Cup next year. Seattle had one heck of a season in their first playoffs, and Vancouver's trying to get a little bit better, so maybe one of those two teams could challenge for a cup. So definitely, there's some of those teams are a little bit more in the rebuilding stage, like in Arizona or San Jose, and some teams may not be as good, like Winnipeg or Columbus, but I think there could be a couple teams out there who at least get into the playoffs and have a chance to challenge for their first ever Stanley Cup. So, as we said, Vegas, Washington, St. Louis over the past 6 years have all won their first Stanley Cup. Hopefully, over the next couple of years, we continue to see this trend, and we have some more markets who have not won a cup at this point win their first ever Stanley Cup, which would be quite fun to see. So definitely interesting, but yeah, Marshall won the Conn Smythe, and Vegas became the 21st team in NHL history to win a Stanley Cup. So definitely going to be interested to see who wins the Cup next year, and definitely interested to see if it will be indeed another first-time Stanley Cup winner. But that's all the playoff updates I'm going to get to today. No injuries as well, so we'll just go right over to the news part of the video. We have 3 big pieces of news to talk about here. First, we'll get to the Ottawa Senators and the New Jersey Devils. Now, both the Ottawa Senators and New Jersey Devils have gone through the club-elected arbitration with some of their big pending RFAs. The Devils have taken Timo Meier to club-elected arbitration, and the Senators have taken Alex DeBrincat to club-elected arbitration. Now, this just allows them to keep the player without having to qualify him on their qualifying offer. Once again, we said that these two have really high qualifying offers. DeBrincat has a $9 million qualifying offer. Timo Meier has a $10 million qualifying offer. So if this does go to arbitration, which usually happens late July, early August, then the teams will be able to have the cap hits off their qualifying offers reduced. So the Devils could sign Meier to a one-year deal that's under $9 million, and the Sens could sign DeBrincat to a one-year deal that's under $8 million. So it could be a little bit better for their cap situations, but it's probably not ideal. So it just gives them a little bit more time. Instead of qualifying them as an RFA on July 1st, they now have until later in the year to work out a new deal. So that way they have a few more weeks to figure out what they're going to do. So for Meier, I still think the Devils want to sign him to a long-term extension. There was some talk I saw a little while ago. Not sure if it's still true, but it sounded like the Devils and Meier were trying to work on a long-term extension. So I definitely think that they'll try and continue to work on a long-term extension. I don't think the Devils only want Meier for 1 year. So I definitely think they'll try and find something maybe just under the $10 million cap hit, maybe somewhere between like a $9 and $9.5 million on a long-term deal. But still, I will definitely believe that the Devils are going to try and sign Meier way before the arbitration date. As for Ottawa, this just buys them time to find a trade. You know, that's what a lot of people have said. It does sound like DeBrincat and Ottawa are going to be separating at some point. A lot of people think it's going to be around the draft, which is when DeBrincat was traded last year. So there's a lot of talk that DeBrincat could be moved. But if he's not moved by a draft and it starts to drag out a little bit, at least they don't have to qualify him on July 1st. And now his contract gets bumped to deeper into the offseason. So it does sound like this is a way that they could get some more time to work out a trade that works, even if they aren't able to find one before July 1st, so you don't have to sign him to his qualifying offer. And it sounds like there's still a very good likelihood that DeBrincat gets dealt at some point. So definitely interesting to see. But now we know that the Devils with Timo Meier and the Senators with Alex DeBrincat have elected to go to salary club arbitration. So definitely going to be interesting to see if it does get there. And if it does get there, I could see one-year deals for both of those guys at lesser cap hits. But I would definitely expect the DeBrincat trade earlier, and maybe the Devils are able to sign Meier long-term. So definitely going to be interesting to see and situations to watch over the next couple of weeks. And then, like we said on Thursday, yesterday was the first buyout period, so the first ability for teams to buy out other players. And we saw one buyout, which was actually quite a huge one that I've talked about sparsely over the course of the season that could happen, but was very unlikely because he still has a couple of years left. But the Vancouver Canucks were able to buy out Oliver Ekman-Larsson's contract, and he's now going to be unrestricted free agent. So the contract was just over $7 million, with the Arizona Coyotes retaining some salary on that deal. So it affects both teams. The Canucks are going to have a whole bunch of cap space over this next year. So if you look at the cap structure right now, the only dead cap the Canucks have on their book this year is for $140,000. That has allowed the Canucks to have a ton more cap hit this year. For next year, they're going to have a $2.3 million cap hit on their books and dead caps, so that's going to be a little bit difficult. But once again, the salary cap's most likely going up next year, so that should help them. And then in year 3 and 4, which are going to be the most difficult years on this buyout, they're going to have $4.7 million on their cap and dead cap. And then after the 4th year, that goes down to 4 straight years of $2.1 million in dead cap. So definitely, it's not overly ideal given the fact they're now going to have to pay $2 million over the next 8 years. But they get over $7 million in extra cap space to work with this year, which is a huge win given the fact that the Canucks were already over the cap and that the cap isn't going up this year. So it was definitely a huge win for the Canucks. They needed some cap space, and buying out Oliver Ekman-Larsson seemed like the best way to do it. So I think that was the right move for the Canucks. It does get them cap space. Wonder what they're going to use that cap space for. They could use it to get a center, maybe on the third line. They could use it to get another defenseman to maybe even replace Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Definitely interesting to see what they use the cap space for. The amount of cap space they're going to get this year is immense. and that's a huge win for the Vancouver Canucks. As for the Arizona Coyotes, they had a little bit of retained salary. It's not going to be overly much to pay. Nothing goes over $650,000. Those are on the 2 bad years, so I don't think it's really too much for the Coyotes to be worried about. But the one thing is because he was retained salary for the next couple of seasons, this buyout does extend that retained salary slot. So the Yotes now have retained salary on Oliver Ekman-Larsson for the next 8 years, and you only get 3 retained salary spots. So that makes it really difficult on the rebuilding Coyotes, who love to retain salary on other players to try and maximize their cap space. They're only going to have 2 for the next 8 years, so that's significant for the Arizona Coyotes. But still, Oliver Ekman-Larsson was not living up to that $8 million contract. Arizona tried to give him a fresh start, moved to Vancouver, did not work out. And after not playing overly well with Vancouver, there was no one who really wanted to take on that high cap hit. So I think the buyout was the right move for Vancouver. It gives them a lot for cap space. It gives them another spot on the defensive position. And I think that with the new cap space, they should be able to do some other business this offseason. But definitely, another thing to add to this is that Oliver Ekman-Larsson will now be a UFA, so add another strong defensive player to the market on a cheap 1 to 2 year deal, maybe around like $1.5–2 million. I could see a lot of teams be interested in Oliver Ekman-Larsson in like a third pair role. So definitely interesting to see. But the Canucks have bought out Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Larsson is now a UFA. The Canucks now have over $7 million this year in cap space, which will go down over the next couple of years. But for this year, with the cap still being pretty tight, I think this is a huge one for the Canucks. So definitely, let me know down in the comments what you think. Was this the right move for the Canucks to buy out OEL? And where does OEL go in his new deal? Does he go to a cup contender, or does he go to a lesser team? Definitely, let me know down in the comments. And then finally here, we talk about the offseason preview. Now, we haven't done this in a while, but I want to finish up this offseason preview part of the video with the 2 teams who went to the Stanley Cup Final. So first, we'll start with the Florida Panthers, as they lost. Definitely, they've had a brilliant season this year. Snuck into the playoffs at the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference, and they were the 17th team in the NHL. So definitely, they were really just barely got in, but they were able to get in. Then they upset the Bruins in 7 after coming back from a 3-1 deficit. They were able to oust the Maple Leafs in only 5 games. They swept the Carolina Hurricanes, and after those strong things, they got 2 beat up, and they lost in the cup final to the Golden Knights in 5. So definitely, they had a strong season. I don't think anyone predicted them to make it past round 1, let alone get to the cup final. So definitely, it was really interesting to see. But after winning the President's Trophy the year prior, Panthers looked really good in the playoffs. So what could be next for the Florida Panthers so that they can continue the success after winning the President's Trophy and then winning the Eastern Conference this year in the playoffs? So if you look at their goaltending, they're still pretty set, but I think the goaltending really depends on what happens with Spencer Knight. Knight finished the season in the Players Assistant Program, so I'm not sure exactly if Knight is ready to come back for next year or not. If Knight's not ready to come back, they have to have Bobrovsky as a starter and maybe sign another backup or third stringer who can work with him in the early parts. If Knight is ready to be back next year, I do think they could still have Bobrovsky, sort of use Bobrovsky the earlier part of the season while Knight continues to get up to speed. But I think if they think that Knight's ready and that he can get back into the lineup next year and continue to be a really good starting goaltender, I do wonder if Bobrovsky may be a trade chip. He's making a $10 million cap hit for the next couple of years, as we saw, had some stellar performances in the playoffs. But I'm just not sure if the Panthers are willing to keep a $10 million goalie on their cap hit with the Knight already signed to a $4.5 million extension now. So I definitely wonder if Bobrovsky might be a trade chip for the Panthers. Definitely going to be interesting to see, but I think that's a trade possibility for the Panthers, and they could try and move Bobrovsky to free up some cap space. On the defensive end, they have 2 key guys, Montour and Forsling, who are entering the final year of their deal, so they could try and look to extend them. Montour had a fantastic season last year, so I definitely could see him try and extend Montour. Forsling a little bit less likely, but still a solid top 4 defenseman, so I would definitely look at those 2 guys and could see that Florida Panthers possibly try and extend them. I would also think that they will be looking for a top 4 defenseman. They didn't really do well defensively this year without Mackenzie Weegar and Ben Sherratt, who they lost last offseason, so I could see him being in the hunt for a top 4 defenseman. They also still have Josh Mahura. I do wonder if they maybe try and give one of their younger guys like a Matt Kiersted or a Max Gildon a third pair role next year, or if they go with the experienced route and maybe try and bring back Radko Gudas or go out in free agency or trade and try and acquire a third pair defenseman. So definitely interesting to see, but I think they need to try and extend Montour or Forsling on the defensive end. They need to bring in another top 4 defenseman, and then either they need to sign Radko Gudas, go out in free agency and get a new defenseman, or one of the younger players step up in the lineup. So definitely interesting to see, but I can see a little bit of tinkering on the defensive end. The forward group, I don't expect much to happen. They have most of their guys signed for next year. One guy I do wonder but possibly be moved would be Duclair or Reinhart. Both are entering the final year of their deal. Both are making over $3 million. I do wonder if one of them gets moved to free up some cap space, if they're not going to move Bobrovsky especially. Both are still all top 9 forwards, but I think they could definitely use a little bit more cap space. So definitely watch out for maybe Reinhart or Duclair to be moved. They still have a solid team. I could maybe see them add 1 or 2 bottom 6 forwards. I could also see him at a top 9 forward, so definitely interesting to see if they do try and add another one. Especially if they get rid of Duclair or Reinhardt, I could see him at a cheaper top 9 forward to the lineup. And then they also got a couple of good youngsters, Denisenko, Samoskevich, Heponiemi, who are 3 key guys who look like they could be NHL prospects. I think all look like they could be NHL players right now. I think all 3 of them could definitely be challenging for a roster spot next year with the Panthers, and I think Denisenko and Samoskevich both have top 6 potential in their future. So with a team who's not too good with the cap situation and looking for some help on the top 9, I could see him turn to guys like Samoskevich or Denisenko to try and round out that top 6. But definitely, I think if they can maybe move Reinhardt or Duclair, get some picks and prospects in return, and clear some cap space, maybe go out and get one more cheaper forward who's a little bit less on the cap than a guy like Duclair or Reinhardt, and then maybe round out that bottom 6 with a couple of free agent signings, and then bring in a guy like Denisenko, Samoskevich, or Heponiemi to work out in that top 9. And I think that Panthers team is going to do really good. I think if they can tweak a little bit of things, make this team a little bit stronger for the regular season, they should be a ton better for next year. Maybe they get back to the Stanley Cup final. We'll have to wait and see, but definitely. Bobrovsky could be traded, but if Knight doesn't look like he could be going, or if they don't have confidence that Knight will be going for the get-go, I think that they could definitely go and try and keep Bobrovsky for next year. I think that the defense needs some work. They could try and extend Montour and Forsling. I could also see them look for a top 4 defenseman, and then either acquire a third pair defenseman, bring back Radko Gudas, or give one of their spots to younger players. And then on the forward group, move one of Duclair or Reinhardt, bring in a cheaper top 9 forward, and then round out that forward group with maybe a couple of depth signings, and also give guys like Denisenko and Samoskevich a chance at the NHL level. And I think if they do this, they should definitely be a solid Eastern Conference team next year, and maybe even challenge for the Stanley Cup again. So definitely interesting to see, but I think if they can do some of these things, they should be a much better team next year. As for the Golden Knights, I don't expect them to do too much next year. I think after winning the Stanley Cup this year, being a dominant team, they were the best team in the Western Conference with 111 points, beating out teams like the Edmonton Oilers, Colorado Avalanche, Dallas Stars. They were also the best team in the West in the playoffs, being the Jets in 5, the Oilers in 6, and then the Stars in 6, and then being the Panthers in the Stanley Cup final. They were the best team in the league this year. The first time in 6 years they have won the Stanley Cup. So I definitely can't wait to see what they do in this offseason. What can they do to improve? Well, in the goalie position, they still have Logan Thompson as their starting goaltender. He signed for a couple more years at an extremely cheap cap hit and was an all-star goalie this past season. So I completely expect Thompson to continue to be the starting goalie, but they don't have too much clarity on the backup position. So that's where I think they could try and add. Aiden Hill was a fantastic goalie for them this year. Definitely worked well in the playoffs. I could see him try and bring him back, although he might be a tad bit too expensive after the way he played in the playoffs to bring back. If they don't want to pay Hill like $4.5 million, he may go to free agency. So in that case, I could see him try and bring back Laurent Brossoit. Brossoit is also a pretty good goaltender. I would expect him to probably maybe get like a 1 to 2 year deal at somewhere around like $3.5 million, which would be a lot cheaper. If they can't bring back either Hill or Brossoit, I could see him go to the goalie market via free agency or via trade and try and bring back a backup goalie who they could tandem with Logan Thompson. And then on top of that, I do think they try and move on from goaltender Robin Lehner. Lehner was injured the entire season this past year, was their starting goaltender last year. He's making $5 million for the next 2 years, and still is probably viewed as a really good, at least 1A goalie in the NHL. There would be some teams who will be wary of acquiring him because he's just coming off of injuries, and they're not exactly sure how well he'll play next year. But I think if the Golden Knights could move him to another team, get that $5 million off their cap, it would definitely help their cap situation. So I definitely think that Lehner trade is definitely a possibility this year. And then if they don't bring back Bobrovsky, they have to go out and get a new backup goaltender who's a little bit cheaper than Lehner. But still, I think that's the way the Golden Knights go in the goalie position. On the defensive end, all their guys are signed for next year. Martinez, Pietrangelo, McNabb, Theodore, Haig, Whitecloud, their top 6 from this Stanley Cup run, all signed for next year. So I don't expect too much movement. The one move I could see him do is maybe move Alec Martinez. He was a solid defender in the playoffs, a solid defender in the Cup run. But I do think that with 1 year left at $5.25 million, not sure if he'd be back next year. Plus, they have enough good defensemen to definitely hold down the fort. So I think that there's a very likely scenario that Martinez is gone after next year, and maybe they try and either bring in a third pair defenseman who's a lot cheaper and promote one of Haig or Whitecloud, or try and get one of the younger players like a Cormier or a Cheka or a Korzak and have those guys develop as like their third pair defenseman, as those three all look like it could be eventually NHL defensemen. So definitely, that's really the only move I'll see on the defensive end. They still have a solid defense, and I don't expect too much changes. On the forward group, Stevenson, Marchessault, Carrier, all entering the final year of their deal. So it would not be surprising if they tried to talk contract extension and extend them beyond this year. Carrier and Marchessault, as we know, are original Golden Knights, and they really fit in well with Vegas. Stevenson's done well since being acquired from Washington, and I think he could definitely do really well, but he's definitely going to need a huge contract raise. So in my opinion, I think they will try and talk contract with all three of these guys, and if they can get them signed on a new contract to keep them beyond next year, I think they would definitely try and do that. Besides that, I think they would love to keep Ivan Barbashev, but he could command some sort of a price between like $4.5 and $5.5 million, which I think might be a little bit out of the Golden Knights' price range. So as much as he fit in really well in their top 6, I do think he could move. They still have some serious depth on that team. They have Brett Howden, Pavel Dorofiev, Amadio, Waugh, Cotter, a ton of other names as well. They even have a couple of guys in the minors like Romberg and young former first-round pick and Brendan Brisson, who I think could challenge for a roster spot next year. So it's definitely interesting to see. But I think the Golden Knights are definitely going to have some situations to work out with. If they aren't able to sign Barbashev, I could see him sign another top 9 forward, a more veteran, to try and round out that team. But definitely, I don't expect too much changes. So, in my opinion, they bring back Thompson as their starter, they move Lehner to a new team, and then they either sign Hill or Brossoit or someone else to be their backup for Thompson. They move Martinez, who I think is just going to be a cap casualty for the Golden Knights, being in the final year of his deal, and then they either bring in a third pair defenseman who's a lot cheaper than Martinez, or they have one of their younger players go into that role. And on the forward group, try and extend guys like Stevenson, Marchessault, Carrier if they can, because they're all really big pieces of their group. They have Barbashev, who I think they won't be able to bring back. If they aren't, I could see him go after a top 9 forward. And then they still have a solid depth on that team. So I think that they should definitely be contending again for the Stanley Cup next year and definitely try and defend their title. So I don't expect the Golden Knights to fall off too much, even if they lose guys like Barbashev and Hill. And I think they could definitely still be a really good team going into next year. So definitely, let me know what you think down in the comments. Does Florida try and move one of Reinhart and Duclair and sign a top 4 defenseman? And are the Golden Knights able to keep Barbashev and Hill, or do they have to go after a different goaltender and a different top 9 forward? Definitely let me know what you think down in the comments. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. We probably won't do any more videos until Tuesday. Tomorrow is Father's Day, so happy Father's Day to all of the fathers out there. I'm probably not going to do any videos tomorrow. Also, there hasn't really been anything significant enough to do their own video for, so unless something significant happens later today or tomorrow that would signify a video for Monday, I'll probably just do a next video on Tuesday. So definitely, stay tuned for that. Remember to like this video and subscribe down below. I also do a blog. I do trade rumors, off-season plans, news, so definitely check that out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below, and I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.